I want to show you something I've recently started getting into. It's rather entertaining and I enjoy doing it. Also, it does save money. That is roasting my own coffee. Now, when I first started doing some research on this, I mean, it was by chance. I just saw a random video of one of like an older type of reenactment type of kind of person who was roasting it over a fire. And really, they just had a big wide pan and they had the raw coffee beans, like the green bean, not green beans, but green coffee beans. And they simply put it in a pan over the fire and roasted it. And granted, that's an art form all in itself. But, I was like, hey, that would be pretty neat to try that. And then I started doing some research, and it turns out not only is it kind of, something kind of unique that you can do yourself and try different things and come up with different flavors, but also the fact of the cost. And the cost can be up to about 40% less, and especially with some websites that if you buy in bulk, like if you buy like 10 pounds, it's going to be a lot cheaper compared to some of the other generic stuff like you may get on Amazon or something. So for example, on Amazon, one of their basic 1 pound, well actually it's 12-ounce bag is about $7.20. So with this website that I got a lot of on, the beans that we've been getting is Sweet Maria's, right? And if you buy one, they start out at $5.45, and this is at the time of recording, of course, for 1 pound. And if you add, I did about 10 pounds in there, and it got down to like $4 and some odd cents a pound. So that was surprising, and it makes sense because there is labor involved with roasting coffee. Also, the fact of when you're doing it, it's going to be more fresh, and you can actually kind of experiment, add different beans. I mean, you can really get into this really crazy. But it was a bit overwhelming when I started doing that research. And luckily, we found out that there is some people apparently were using like popcorn poppers, a hot air popcorn popper, that spins around. And so then one company kind of took that idea and ran with it, what I feel like. And these obviously are not promotional. I'm not getting any kickback on any of this. But it's called Popper, Popper, and you can tell it looks a lot like a hot air popcorn popper. There is some significant differences. It does seem to be a lot more well insulated on the inside with a ceramic housing, and also on the cover on top. Now you have a hot air popcorn popper. The popcorn comes out. This actually has a catcher, which is very important here, because this catcher will actually catch the stuff that comes off the beans as they're heating up. And this is kind of the flaky stuff. It's got a technical name, but I call it the flaky stuff. All right. Anyway, and also lets the hot air to kind of escape out of there, so it don't overheat too much too on that part. And it's got some timers and several different settings built into this. And doing some research even on this, it was kind of overwhelming to begin with. But eventually, what I do is what I'm going to share with you to make it a little bit simple, and you definitely have the option to kind of go in more in detail on that. So what you need for this particular process is, of course, I'm using the Popper, Popper, their roasting machine there. Also, you need green coffee beans, and of course, this came with the popcorn popper there. You need a scale, all right, and a small scale preferably, a cup, and a bag to put your coffee beans in once they're done. So to get started here, there is a limit on how much you need to put in here. So I'm putting our container in here first. I'm hitting a button there, and I'm going to be adding 3 ounces. Technically, all the directions talk about grams, but I'm American, so yeah, I'm going to go by ounces. So about 2. Okay, all right, we're at 3 ounces there. Now, there's several reasons why everything you do with this, you need to be doing the same thing. It reminds me a lot of throwing knives and throwing tomahawks in a weird kind of way. If you start changing a lot of different variables, you end up with a whole different product, or like in the case of throwing tomahawk, it doesn't stick, right? But with this, you can end up with something horrible, or it's not even cooked, it's not even roasted enough. Now that's one of the part of the attraction as far as experimenting, coming up with different types of flavors, is by starting to change the variables. But my recommendation is, if you're going to do that, only change one variable at a time. So the biggest variable on this device here seems to be the most thing is the temperature. The dial on the side here is the temperature, and you may see I actually have a little mark right there. So that's at about 80% of the turned all the way up on the temperature right now. Okay, and turn that off, of course. It was on. It was on. And also it has a timer here. So when you turn the bottom dial, like we turn it in reverse, you can see it has 10 minutes on there right now. That's the maximum amount of time. Some people experiment with 7 minutes, 8 minutes, or whatever. But what I've been doing here recently is I've just been doing it about 80% turned all the way up. I'm using the high setting, and I'm doing 10 minutes. Now, it doesn't actually roast the coffee for 10 minutes. The last 3 minutes of this 10-minute cycle, it comes down. The fan still is blowing, but the heating element stops blowing heat out. And it keeps it spinning around, that cools it off. The same process applies for if you're making it over like a fire. You know, after it's been done, they put it in a basket that has a lot of airflow and then move it around. Otherwise, it will just keep on cooking. All right. Now, also, this is probably a little bit higher than what some people do in the amount of time. I kind of like dark roast. Technically, this thing is advertised as it will not do dark roast, so I'm not really getting in dark. It is a medium. I feel like it's a medium to a medium dark, but with this setting, it's about 80% turned up on the temperature, and the high, and at 10 minutes. I've been happy with that. Some people would even start adjusting things. Start out low, start out and then go to high, back to low again, and yeah, you can really get kind of crazy if you want. And I probably will do that over time. Right now, I'm just sticking with this for a little while and make sure I'm happy with it. About a couple of years ago, I started noticing a lot of coffee was giving me more heartburn. Turns out there's different levels of acid in coffee, and different things can contribute to that. And some of that is like roasting. There was one company who really advertises really low acid levels in their coffee because of special roasting techniques they have. This method, though, I haven't really had any of the heartburn issues, so I'm guessing it's working out good for me on that part. That may also have to do with the country, or how the beans are dried and everything. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. We do have 3 ounces in this. This is currently turned off. I'm going to go ahead and pour in the beans into the little area there. All right. I'm going to turn the timer to where it does say 10 minutes right there now by that bottom dial. All right. And I'm not going to turn that. I'm going to leave it in off until I get the cover back on there. This little container I was a little worried about, but it's kind of like a semi-permanent hinge here. It has a little lip that clips on right there. And it stays there until you close that down. Clip on both sides. All right. And there it goes. And then when you turn this up to high, it's going to start the cycle. You don't have to change anything unless you just really want to kind of adjust it as it goes. All right, we'll get that started, and we'll cut over to our time lapse, and we'll see where we're at the end. we can tell the time it went off. Now, a couple of things I want to kind of talk about the cycle that you just saw there. So when we first turned it on, of course, the heat went all the way up. I have it on the high, where 80% of the power it can use. After a while, after about 5 minutes or so, it'll start making a popping sound. All right, it's almost like popcorn popping. It's kind of funny that it looks like a popcorn popper, and that's called the first crack, I believe is what they call it. And close to the end, you start to hear what they call second crack, and that's when about the time that happens, this device is going into the cool down mode. And like if you leave it in there, apparently, if you were to like going over a fire, for example, when you hear the second crack, that's the time to kind of take it off a lot of times. Or if you keep it on a little bit longer, then you'll get a darker roast. Too long, it's going to taste like burnt coffee. So haven't had that experience with this device yet with burnt coffee taste, so I'm happy with that. But I don't hear a lot of the second crack on this or the second popping sound, a series of popping sounds, but definitely the first. And you can tell whenever that popping happens, that seems to be correlating with the particles flying up and down in the air here, and might be able to see in there that kind of catches everything, and that's just all the stuff that all the extra stuff that comes off. Without that on there, it would be going all over the place. It would make a mess out of your kitchen area that you're working in. So now, of course, keep in mind the good thing about this right here, you definitely want to make sure you clean this out, because if it gets too hot, the thing's just going to melt. I mean, this is pretty hot to the touch right now, but you definitely don't want to keep on doing batches after batches without emptying this out. In reference to that, they do recommend you unplug it for 30 minutes before you start another batch. That's probably the downside of this. You can't throw in a whole pound. It's just not going to work. It won't have enough room to move it all around and keep everything kind of stirring in there. I have not had a problem doing the 3 ounces. That's worked out pretty good for me on that part. And if you put too much in there, apparently you're looking and you can't even see it turning around. All right. So they definitely want to not overload that, and give it 30 minutes to cool down. Then after 30 minutes, I plug it back up. I'll start another cycle. What I've been doing here recently, if I had like a 1 pound bag, I just keep on doing it 3 ounces at a time as I walk by throughout the day, start another batch and everything, and then I'll have all the coffee. All right, now at this point, a little trick I was doing is I would leave it in here for about half an hour afterwards. It seems to make a little bit darker roast. Kind of trying to cheat there, doing something it says it can't do. So we just pour it out. And then you can see the dark roast, the medium roast technically, coffee beans there compared to what we had before. All right, and then I normally let this sit for a while. After about 5 minutes, let it kind of cool off a little bit, then I'll throw it in a Ziploc bag. Now, this goes into another thing after that. The general information that I've seen, keep in mind, I'm no master roaster or whatever you want to call it, is that you don't want to just roast it and make a coffee out of it. It needs to sit at least for 24 hours. I've seen some references to that. Some other people say at least 7 days or at least 30 days. I mean, it depends on to me, it depends on how much you're out of coffee and how bad you need it. But generally, I have been waiting about 7 days on average before I start actually grinding it up, making coffee out of it. And in reference to the grinding up, I've known that for a while that fresh grinding coffee is needed. It always seems to taste better. But it turns out some people say once you grind coffee up, it's actually only houses full flavor for 7 days. So definitely don't want to make a whole pound of this and throw it all in the grinder and then go through it all. I mean, unless you're just going to drink that, then go through a whole pound in 7 days, So ideally, if you have a little small grinder, I had a fancy one that you could select the different types of how fine you want it. That ended up messing up. I have a really basic one that you just hold it down, and then the longer you hold it, the finer it does it, and that works okay for me and everything. Or you can really you do the old hand crank ones too, if you want your wrist to fall off. All right. But anyway, overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm sure there's other websites But the one that I've been getting from, they actually had this thing as a kit. It had 3 different bags to try here of the green coffee beans, and I'm definitely going to continue with that. I believe not just for the savings, but also just for the hobby. And it is kind of unique to eat coffee that you've roasted yourself. I mean, you didn't grow it yourself, I mean, so of course, but at least it is one more thing that you have control over and everything in your daily routine. All right, thanks for watching.